Selamat Datang Ki, Pergolanon, Bersajara, Yang Lembot, Derka, Untuk, Menadurkan, Anda Dingan, Ninyak, Sambi Menamia, Kisa Kisa, Manarik, Darimasa, Lalu, Dengarkan Usaha, Luar Biasa, Umat Manusha, Daripada Kitahanan, Untuk Bertahan, Kipada Seta Sita, Kwasadan, Penkapian, Tamadan Yang, Dilapakan, Ridupakan, Lampu, Munkin Hidapkan, Kipas Untuk Dengang Lembot, Dan Sertikami, Untuk Perjalanan, Malami Ini. Imagine you're in a small village in medieval England, tucked between rolling hills and frost-covered fields. It's winter, not just any winter, but one of those bitter seasons that tests the soul. You wake before sunrise. The air inside your home is barely warmer than outside. The floors packed dirt, damp, cold, unyielding. The walls, built from wattle and daub, creak softly in the wind. There is no insulation, no glass windows. Only linen or animal skins fluttering over open gaps. You pull your rough woolen tunic tighter. It scratches your skin, but it traps warmth. Beneath it, layers of linen and more wool. You're dressed like an onion, each layer a defense against the chill. The hearth is the heart of the home, shallow stone basin where fire smolders under ash. Your father taught you how to bank the fire, tucking embers beneath a mound of ashes each night, so that by morning a single breath can stir it to life. There is no chimney, just a smoke hole in the roof, so the air is thick and smells of burning wood and wet wool. You cough gently, but it's a comfort now, a sign that the fire still lives. Your mother stirs a pot over the flames. Tonight it's barley, carrots, maybe a sliver of salted pork if you're lucky. Thick stew, heavy with fat. It's not just food, it's fuel for warmth, stored deep in your bones. You haven't bathed in weeks, not because you don't want to, but because water is freezing and soap is rare. Besides, the layers of sweat, oil, and dirt, they act like armor. A greasy, smelly barrier between your body and the cold. At night, everyone huddles together. Parents, children, even livestock. Yes, the family cow and goats sleep inside. It's not just for safety, but because their warm breath, their quiet heartbeats are part of the survival strategy. Your little brother sleeps with a warm stone at his feet, heated near the fire, then wrapped in cloth. Your sister presses a pouch of dry hay against her belly to keep her supper warm for as long as possible. Breathing slowly through the nose, you warm the air before it reaches your lungs. You've learned this. Rushed, icy breaths only lead to coughs and sickness, and outside, the wind howls through the thatched rooftops, like a warning or a lullaby depending on your mood. Snow drifts against the door, but inside, there's a quiet stubbornness, a warmth made of closeness, smoke, and shared effort. When one family's fire dies, a neighbor brings embers in a covered pot. When someone falls ill, the village women gather with herbs and broth. There is no hospital, no doctor, just a community that refuses to let its own fade away. And somehow, through cold, through hunger, through night after endless night, you survive. Not because of strength, but because of warmth. Not from the fire alone, but from the people beside you. Now we drift from the muddy villages of the medieval countryside into the cold, polished corridors of a Tudor palace. Candles flicker on stone walls. Tapestries rustle gently in the winter draft. And within these royal halls, a young woman is about to change the fate of a kingdom. Her name was Anne Boleyn. She wasn't born to be a queen. Came from a noble, but not royal family. Ambitious, intelligent, and determined. As a young girl, she was sent to the finest courts of Europe. First the Netherlands, then France. There she learned languages, dance, poetry. But more importantly, she learned observation, silence, and charm. Skills more valuable than any crown. When she returned to England, she was unlike any lady at court, sharp of wit, quick of tongue, and with a gaze that held its own. King Henry VIII noticed her, first as an intrigue, then as an obsession. But Anne did something dangerous. She refused the king. She would not become his mistress. She asked for something greater, the crown. It was unthinkable. Henry was married. The Pope stood between him and Anne, but Henry was not a man to be denied, and Anne was not a woman to settle for less. Years passed. Courts argued, kingdoms trembled, and England itself changed. To be with Anne, Henry broke with the Catholic Church. He named himself head of a new faith, the Church of England, and in 1533 he married her. She was crowned queen. But now the gamble truly began. Anne's place on the throne was balanced on a knife's edge. To secure her future, she needed to give the king a son. She bore him a daughter, Elizabeth, a bright, fierce child. But not what the king wanted. Then came the miscarriages. Whispers grew louder. Enemies gathered like vultures. And in the shadows stood Thomas Cromwell, once her ally, now her silent executioner. It didn't take much. A rumor here, an accusation there, adultery, incest, treason. Anne was arrested, locked in the Tower of London. Once a royal residence, now her cage. At her trial, she stood proud, calm, almost serene. She defended herself with grace and fire, but the verdict had been written long before. On a cool morning in May 1536, Anne walked to the scaffold. She wore gray, elegant, understated. Her final words were gentle. Her death, quick. A single sword stroke. Silence. Then the crowd breathed again. But Anne's story didn't end there. Her daughter, Elizabeth, the child no one wanted, grew to become one of the greatest monarchs England has ever known. Anne Boleyn lost her head. But she changed the head of the church, the heart of a nation, and the course of history. And tonight, her voice echoes softly through time, not as a victim, but as a woman who dared to play the game of kings, and left behind a legacy no blade could ever erase. Let the candle burn low now, as we leave behind the palaces of England, across the cold Atlantic Ocean. It is December 1773. The city is Boston and the American colonies, and something is about to change forever. The harbor is quiet under a pale winter moon. Wooden ships sway gently on the water. Crates stacked high on deck hold the cargo of empire, leaf after leaf of East India tea. But this isn't just tea. Not anymore. The colonists, men and women alike, feel something deep stirring in their bones. A quiet defiance. A restless sense of unfairness. You see, for years now, the British government had been taxing them without giving them a voice in Parliament. No taxation without representation, they whispered. At taverns, in markets, at supper tables. Then came the Tea Act. On paper it seemed simple, cheaper tea for everyone. But in truth it was a trap dressed in kindness. The tax was still there. And accepting the tea meant accepting the British Parliament's control. To some, this was intolerable, unacceptable. So they organized, not with swords or cannons, but with silence, precision, and planning. On the night of December 16th, a group of men disguised themselves as Mohawk warriors, not to mock, but to symbolize freedom from kings and crowns. They moved quietly, boarded 3 ships in the harbor, Dartmouth, Eleanor, and Beaver. And without breaking a single window, without harming a single soul, they lifted 342 crates of tea and gently tossed them into the dark, icy waters. No fire. No blood. Just the sound of splashes, one after another, as the harbor slowly filled with leaves of protest. People watched in silence from the docks, not with fear, but with awe. This was not a riot, it was a statement. By morning, the world would know. Boston had spoken. And the British Crown, it was furious. They passed the coercive acts. Laws meant to punish, meant to frighten the colonies into obedience. But instead of dividing them, these acts brought the colonies together. From Virginia to New York, the people rallied. They wrote letters. They met in halls. They lit lanterns of unity. The First Continental Congress was born, and so too was a revolution. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just about tea. It was about dignity. It was about the right to choose. It was the soft but steady beat of a new idea, that governments exist by the will of the people. And tonight, as you close your eyes, perhaps you'll hear it. The splash of a crate hitting the water, and the quiet breath of a world about to change. Instead, there are pyramids wide and low, platforms and plazas, designed not for conquest, but for gathering. Here, people sang together. They played instruments carved from the bones of birds and deer. flutes and horns, producing strange, beautiful sounds that echoed through the desert night. Their ceremonies were grand, not in bloodshed, but in rhythm. Caral was clever. Their engineers diverted rivers with simple but brilliant irrigation channels, bringing life to dry land. They grew cotton, soft, strong, and traded it for dried fish from the coast. Their economy built not on domination, but on cooperation. Their homes were modest, but their minds vast. The layout of the city reflected the stars. Buildings aligned with the sun at solstice, as if the people of Caral knew that time itself was something to build with. And then, just as quietly as they appeared, they vanished. Not from war, not from fire, perhaps drought. Perhaps the rivers changed their course, or maybe the people of Caral simply moved on, carrying their knowledge like seeds in the wind. No texts remain, no kings remembered, only stones and silence. But in that silence, a truth, that civilization does not require bloodshed to grow. That humans, even in the oldest times, could choose music over violence, trade over conquest, harmony over hierarchy. And so, as you rest your head tonight, know that long before the noise of modern history, there was a city that whispered to the stars, listened for the quiet answers. Selamat Pagifram, the cold villages of the Middle Ages, to the intrigue-filled kingdoms. From the frigid harbors of Boston to the sun-scorched valleys of Caral, history is vast and fierce. But tonight, it whispers its story to you. Thank you for listening. Now, close your eyes and let your dreams take you farther than time.